Yo, all right, what's up? Finally live. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Happy Saturday night. Hope y'all are having fun. You're chilling just like me. Okay, good. We're working here. Sorry about that. I'm sorry I'm late. I try not to be late. Now I see why some of our friends, not that they need a reason, but now I see why some of our friends tend to, you set a time, and then the time comes along, and then it kind of drags out, and then bam. Okay, now we got the volume. Come on now. All right, so yeah, because there's all sorts of like last minute things that happen. I don't want to bore you with that, but yeah, there's like a bunch of last minute things, a bunch of last minute, and I'm like total boomer tech here, so as you know. So anyway, we're just doing the best we can. So yeah, shout out to everybody here. Shout out to everybody who's watching live, and if you're watching later, thank you for being here. This is my channel. Thank you to ADH, a devotional heart, for having me on early today. That was so awesome. She's one of my buddies. She's one of my friends, and it was really cool for her to invite me. Excuse me, man. I'm like JD tonight with the dust in the library. Sorry, you guys. But yeah, that was very kind of her. Very sweet to ask me to be on her show. That was a surprise and really cool because we all love a devotional heart here. We love ADH. She's a great interviewer. She's so excellent. She puts everybody at ease. If you go over to her channel and you just watch some of her interviews, you can tell right away. For instance, I would recommend her interviews with, of course, Jay Dyer, with Jamie. Shout out to Jamie Hanshaw, who also has a new show on her YouTube channel. What's it called, you guys? Is it Out of This World? Also, shout out to her interview, ADH's interview with Father Turbo Qualls, and with TGF. She's interviewed a whole lot of people, and she always does great interviews. So yeah, make sure you like her channel. I'm sure everybody here is already, sub to her channel. In fact, you probably got to me through her. So thank you again. And also thank you. Big shout out to the Crucible channel, who had me and my homeboy Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies live streams on earlier this week. That was an awesome interview. I had so much fun. Very honored to be on these big channels. These guys they're really cool. They're high IQ, and it was good to just chat about stuff. So that being said, let's get back to some some literature. I was going pretty hard every day, pretty consistently for a couple weeks there. And then, we did a couple shows in the last couple weeks, but stuff happens. But we're gonna get back into our routine. And I thought I would start with a good Saturday night stream where some of our homies are out, having fun, partying. Shout out to Mixkey, shout out to Nateski, all of our friends out there. Okay, probably hitting the waves right now. But we're going to keep going and just dive into some literature. I thought it would be good. This isn't too complex. This material that we're doing tonight isn't that complex. But we're doing it because it's one of my favorite poets, and that is Dylan Thomas. So let's just dive right in. Thanks for letting me do the intro, you guys, and shout out to my mods, especially my main homeboy Jethro. I love you, homie. And yes, if you're watching this, please hit those links, right? PayPal, Cash App, support the channel, support me, and help me to grow the channel so we can keep going. So thank you. If you've already supported me, of course, I know who you are. I love you, and thank you for supporting me. I appreciate you. And please, let's share this and help to grow the channel, you guys. It's like really foggy in here tonight. My screen, I don't know what's up with my screen. It's not like smoky in here or anything. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe it's just the sultry air that we're getting with April turning into a long, hot summer, right, later on. So anyway, tonight we're doing Dylan Thomas, the Welsh poet who lived from 1914 to 1953. He is one of my favorite poets of all time. I love Dylan Thomas. I always have loved Dylan Thomas. And I suppose it's probably pretty natural for, a young dude who, is like a young teenager who loves literature to get into Dylan Thomas because, look at the precedent set by some of the rock stars of the past, right? A lot of people love Dylan Thomas, especially in like especially rock stars and guys like that, because he existed in a time sort of before popular, certainly before popular rock music, and before like the big touring rock musicians. And I compare him to that because that's sort of what he was. It sounds kind of, I don't know, it sounds kind of lame to say that, a poet who was like a rock star, but he really was. He did constant touring, and he would go to colleges, music halls, etc. And his tours were really, really popular. They were popular with ladies, of course, because they loved his charisma, his passion. He wasn't a particularly like great looking guy, but he was interesting looking, and he looked like the archetypal poet is how you would describe Dylan Thomas. I'll show you a couple pictures in a minute. Dudes loved him because he was a hard drinking guy from sort of rural Wales whose family was, typically Welsh. And Wales, coal mining, slate mining, stuff like that. And he wasn't a like highbrow academic, but he was learned, and he was a great poet. And he was just lyrical, and he really embodies even today the spirit of the Welsh love of lyricism and uh, countryside, ancient sort of Celtish. There's a little bit of like Celtic rhythm in Dylan Thomas. He sort of embodies the past while also discussing the present and the future. His themes are both they're both, I guess you would say, like they're both sort of archaic in nature, but also present. And like I said in the little introduction there in the channel description, like Dylan Thomas is kind of. I remember an English teacher said this to me when I was like 15, that Dylan Thomas was kind of born in the wrong era. He seems to have been born, too late. He really would have fit into the British Romantic era. See the dog walking around back there, meandering through the house as she does. He's kind of like with Coleridge, Byron, maybe he's a bit Keatsian. Um, his themes of nature and life, and the burning for life. But he also is a poet of his time, really. I mean, he really is a poet of his time. And he lived, I mean, think about when he lived, right? He was born the year that the Great War kicked off, of course, in Europe, which America didn't get into until later. But the Great War kicked off, and he died in 1953, really at the height of the post World War II sort of Cold War era, beginning of Eisenhower, American dominance, and Britain was sort of in its, post war recession. But being Welsh, he was sort of an outsider to all that, right? You may be watching this and you may not even know what is Wales, where is Wales, or we've heard Wales before, and that's okay. So let me get into that a little bit. So I'm not trying to give a lesson or like a history lesson, but maybe you'll find this interesting, or just as a refresher. So when we in America, when people talk about the repping my Unsolved Mysteries original Coinspiracy sweatshirt here, of course, because it's Saturday night and we're chilling, right? So we got to relax a little bit, you guys. So when we talk about, for instance, there are a couple ways that we talk about the British Isles, right? We've got England, which is a country. Yes, forgive me. I'm not trying to, I mean that in a genuine sense, right? We've got England. We've got Scotland. We've got Wales. And then we've got Northern Ireland. Then we've got the Republic of Ireland. We've got the Channel Islands. We've got the Isle of Man. And then we go over to the continent. So the British Isles are kind of, pretty unique because they're not really, they're not that big, right? One of the famous walks you can do is from Land's End to John O'Groats. And Northern Ireland, for example, is about 1/6 the size of Virginia. So, we live in an enormous country from sea to shining sea. But the British, remember, are also dominated by sea. They are completely surrounded by water. Yes. And when we talk about Great Britain, we're talking about the island of Great Britain, England, Wales, and Scotland. That's why, like, for instance, on a British passport, right, you have the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is not on the island of Great Britain, it's separate, it's on the island of Ireland. The island of Ireland is made up of two countries, right? The Republic of Ireland, right? And they're Irish, and Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. In Northern Ireland, they use the British pound. In the Republic of Ireland, they use the euro. I remember in my youth back in the day when they had the Irish punt. I remember when they transferred over to the euro, and there were all these commercials on, ads on TV against the euro with showing Hortler, right? Hitler, as sort of you know, uh, united Europe. This would be trouble. And no matter what you think of the political situation, what's interesting is that Great Britain is part of the European Union, but does not use the euro, right? Some people may not know that they still use the English pound sterling. Anyway, Wales is part of Great Britain, and the reason that you have these separate countries, I'm just going to sort of gloss over it in a simple overview. The reason that you have these separate countries as part of Great Britain is because of the way that it was settled. Remember that the British Isles were they were Iron Age Celtic. Well, no, they weren't Celtic, but I guess they were sort of Druid, right? Then we had Iron Age settlers. Then we had the Romans who took over the islands. Julius Caesar was there, right? London is a Roman city, Londinium. Excuse me. Then we have later we have the Viking invasion, right? We've got the Angles, the Saxons, the Danes, the Celts, the Picts, etc. And the Wales are sort of their own. They're really separate in a number of ways. First of all, the most noticeable is that they have their own alphabet, and the word for Wales in Welsh is spelled Cymru, which is not like the English alphabet, and it's pronounced Cymru. Forgive me if you're Welsh and you're watching. Right, the Prince of Wales is the title for Harry and Prince William don't really have a last name, right? Uh-oh, my connection is unstable. Okay, hold on. If I go out, just give me a second. Should be okay. Should be all right. Am I good? Okay. Buffering. Okay, are we good? Let me know when we're good again if you can hear me. I'm good on this end. I don't know why it's buffering. Okay, we're good, Ellie. There we go. People back in. Okay. Yeah, you're not too late, Jerry. Shout out to Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies, live streams, everybody. Especially if you're watching this later, make sure you sub to his awesome channel. Okay, so yeah, I'll just finish this up because I'm kind of blabbering about Wales. So most, I guess, Americans would know Wales, even the word Wales or Welsh from the Prince of Wales, right? And we know that Prince Harry and Prince William don't have a last name, so to speak, because they're House of Windsor, but that's not really a last name. When they went to fight, if they did so in the military in the wars on tour, they were William Wales. They have to have a name on their uniform, so they say. But anyway, so that's one of the high honorary titles, right? Prince of Wales. But Wales is certainly its own separate thing in spirit. Even though many Welsh are proud Britishers, proud British. One of my best friends is Welsh, and he's I guess you could say typically Welsh. Very funny, very outgoing. He's so smart, and he's got a sort of a self-deprecating sense of humor. Hates the English, but also loves being British. So that sort of leads us to Dylan Thomas and what we can say about Dylan Thomas. Because this small Welsh poet has, became and certainly has become since his death the Welsh poet. The Scottish have Robbie Burns, right? Robert Burns, Old Lang Syne. The English have Shakespeare and so many others. And we, or sorry, not we, I'm not Welsh, but the Welsh have Dylan Thomas. And he is he's a fun character to study. He's a fun guy like to like get to know about. And so one of the first books I got of Dylan Thomas was I got this in the 90s when I was a teenager. Was this book Quite Early One Morning? It's just a book of like prose. And look at him. He's just like also I like it because like especially when I was younger, he kind of looked like me a little bit. Like I had the same hair and all this stuff, and I thought, this guy's cool. And he's got the scarf on and he's lighting a cigarette. This is Quite Early One Morning. Another book of his sort of selected prose is The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog, which is, I mean, just the cover alone and the title of this book is so cool because it's funny. It's lighthearted and lyrical and it's just Dylan Thomas's sort of, loose selected prose. He's just telling stories. And he's known as a poet, but he was a prolific writer. He wrote a lot. He actually wrote a lot for the BBC and the British during the war. He wrote various programs, sort of propaganda. He was sent to certain places, Persia, etc. He would have joined the military. Of course, he was of military age, 1914, so that's 24, 34. I mean, he would have been, in his mid to late 20s during the war, but he couldn't join. They wouldn't let him join because of his health. He, sort of like many poets, he had extreme health issues. He had terrible lungs. Hope I'm not buffering again. If I'm buffering, just power through. We're just going to power through, you guys. He had terrible lungs. I think he had lung disease. They thought that he had tuberculosis his whole life. He had like a weak constitution. He could hardly do any exercise, even though he was an outdoor boy. So anyway, they wouldn't let him join the military, and so he just did, I guess, what he could for the military effort. Of course, that's not to say that he was he was particularly patriotic. Of course, he did a lot of this for money because he was a true poet in every sense of the word. I mean, he was kind of like Poe in that he didn't make his living like as an academic. He didn't teach. He wasn't a university professor. He was sort of a self-taught guy, kind of a real like sort of almost Celtic like bardic figure. Kind of came out of the wilds. Is this wild-looking guy? He smokes. He smokes heavily. He drinks heavily. He loved drinking, and he was like a real, bon vivant, right? He was very popular. He loved pubs. We'll talk later about his later life in New York and what ended up killing him at the age of 39. But again, you see why like rock stars and stuff love Dylan Thomas because of the sort of live fast, die young lifestyle, right? Dying at 39 years old. Again, I'll reiterate. I said this earlier in the 88 stream, but that Bob Dylan, right? Boomers out there. Bob Dylan, Robert Zimmerman, named himself his nom de plume after Dylan Thomas, of course. I'm just going to show you a couple of books that I have of Dylan Thomas, where I sort of have collected all this information over the years. Again, I don't have like notes or anything. I'm just sort of going off the top of my head, which probably seems obvious to you guys if you're watching this. This is one of the great books on Dylan Thomas. This is The Life of Dylan Thomas by Constantine Fitzgibbon, who was a friend of Dylan Thomas. It's just a paperback. This is one of the many copies that I've had over the years. I read this one when I was 17. This is a lot of his books, by the way, are again New Directions paperbacks, which we've talked about with James McLaughlin, and they're sort of intelligence CIA ties, but they are a great publishing house, and they publish some of the great writers of the 20th century. This is another New Directions book, but it's like a smaller book, and this is 8 stories about Dylan Thomas, or by Dylan Thomas. He is playing some croquet, leather jacket on. This is his selected poems that I've had forever. This is his collected poems that I've had forever. This is The Days of Dylan Thomas, a pictorial biography, which I picked up in Ireland, which is an old McGraw-Hill paperback. It's got a lot of great photographs of him, and he and his wife Caitlin, who is her own sort of interesting character that we'll discuss later. But here he is, here he is drinking with the townsfolk. Right there's a look at that kind of hideous picture down there at the bottom. His teeth all rotting out. I'll show you one of my favorite pictures of him. Here he is writing for the BBC with some various figures. Let's see, Warriors. Here's Dylan with their son. And Caitlin, and he still has living descendants that look just like him. By the way, they look exactly like him. The curly. This is my favorite picture of Dylan Thomas with a quote: "Time has ticked to heaven round the stars." And here he is in an old graveyard visiting his aunts, his dead ancestors, surrounded by ivy. I mean, look at that. That right there is the poet. If you want a picture of a poet, there's no better image. I mean, that right there it's so awesome. He's got like the tweed coat. He's got sort of a loose fitting bow tie. His hair's all sort of mussed up. Anyway, so we're not going to just look at pictures, but I'm just showing you some of my books here. This is a copy of Under Milk Wood, his famous play, which I don't really like very much actually, but it's still performed. And there's Elizabeth Taylor, and that's actually not Richard Burton. That's Peter O'Toole on the front. They starred in an adaptation of Under Milk Wood, and that's important because Elizabeth Taylor, of course, was married, I think, twice to Richard Burton, who was a huge fan of Dylan Thomas, being a Welshman. Here's a good hardback copy of Dylan Thomas's Selected Letters. This is another copy of Under Milk Wood from New Directions. Here's book that I picked up in England when I lived there. Dylan Thomas's Miscellany 2. This is probably his most famous book. It's just a book of collected poems with a portrait of him on the front. And then here's that picture again. Here's another biography of him, sort of a rare biography. I think I got this at the Strand Bookstore in New York. Even though it's the Oxford University Press. Here's another sort of rare book, Dylan Thomas in America, which just covers his later American trips, where he was like wild. He was a totally wild man. And then, of course, this is probably one of the definitive biographies of Dylan Thomas, and this is The 9 Lives of Dylan Thomas. Right. And it includes this great picture. Can you see this? Look at that picture. That's him rehearsing for one of his tours, and he looks like he is just the quintessential poet there, right? And he really was he's a real wild man. People loved him. He was like a real bon vivant. So let's see. So what can we say about Dylan Thomas? I light my cigarette again. Should we dive into a couple of his poems so we can actually do some analysis? I called it analysis. So, here's a postcard I got of Dylan Thomas. I think I got this in New York. Actually, it's kind of an interesting story. I don't know if you'll like this or not, but when I moved to New York in 2004, summer 2004, I lived in the East Village. But one of the places I went right away when we moved in was I went straight to the West Village and went to the White Horse Tavern. The White Horse Tavern is a famous bar, like a literary joint. And I went there because it was Dylan Thomas's favorite bar in New York. And they got some, paintings of him on the walls and stuff. And there's a famous picture of him standing at the bar drinking. And I remember that when I went in there, I was like, yay, I'm in New York, I'm going to start acting. And I immediately ran into an old friend, a girl that I don't want to say an ex-girlfriend, a girl I'd gone out with years before that. I ran into her randomly, like on the street outside this bar, right? So it wasn't like New World. It was just Small World, right? And then I saw two, they weren't really celebs at the time, but I remember seeing them that first day. First I saw, what's his name? The guy that carries the crossbow from The Walking Dead. And he's in what's the movie? The Brothers. The movie about the Irishman in Boston. Chad, help me out here. The one with Willem Dafoe. I think the word you're looking. Remember that movie? What does he say? He says, yes, Norman Reedus. Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. Yes, Norman Reedus. What's that movie with the brothers? God, I have total brain fog right now. Willem Dafoe's in it. And he says, the guy says, what's like the symbology of that? And Willem Dafoe says, symbology? Symbolism. I believe the word you're looking for is symbolism. Remember, there was a firefight. Yes, Boondock Saints. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Yeah, so I saw him walking his dog, and then he turned a corner, and then right after that, I saw Justin Theroux. You guys know Justin Theroux, right? From American Psycho, etc. Anyway, that was weird. Anyway, so I was in the bar, and I remember that there was a real fine waitress, and she came up, and we were talking, and she said, what do you do? And I said, I'm an actor. And I thought that was, I didn't think it was particularly cool, but I thought it was, it was something, I guess. And because I was moving there as an actor, I thought, I might as well say this. So I said, I'm an actor. And she immediately said, oh, me too. And I thought, oh no, that was right there. That very first day, that's where I knew it was over. It was not, it wasn't going to work. I was in the new land where everyone was an actor and, totally just one of a million other people. So, but anyway, I would go to the White Horse Tavern quite a lot. And why don't I read Dylan Thomas's, should I start off with one of his most famous poems? Let's start off with, why don't we start off with In My Craft or Sullen Art, page 142 here. So Dylan Thomas was a true lyric poem. He wrote short, impressionistic poems, sometimes with a rhyme scheme, sometimes without, a true sort of modern poet. And he is, he's charismatic, and I don't want to say, passionate, like doesn't do him justice, because anybody's going to describe poems as passionate. But I would say that we really get like a zest for life with these poems. But let's look at the lines in the poems and see what they're actually about. So this one's called it's called My Craft or Sullen Art. He says, in my craft or sullen art, exercised in the still night, when only the moon rages and the lovers lie abed, with all their griefs in their arms, I labor by singing light, not for ambition or bread, or the strut and trade of charms on the ivory stages, but for the common wages of their most secret heart. Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on these spindrift pages, nor for the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art. So this is a really it's a brilliant poem, and it's two stanzas. It's short. It's a short lyric poem. Is there a rhyme scheme? Let's see. Art, night, rages, abed, arms, light. Okay, night and light, bread, charms, arms, stages, wages, heart. Yeah, so there is a rhyme scheme here. But you can see that this isn't the tight rhyme scheme of the sonnet, for example, where we have, if we're speaking of form plus content equals meaning, and we're talking about, like, for instance, in a sonnet where we have two separate characters who are brought together through a series of quatrains and then are finally united in a couplet. We don't have that. Instead, we have a rhyme scheme that it's such a loose rhyme scheme that the rhymed words sort of come back to us after a few lines, like a long sort of journey, and where we remember there is a rhyme scheme. And I think that the point of that is that let's look at the content, right? He's saying that this is another poem. This is a work of art about creating art, which is usually not my favorite, but there's something a little different here, right? First of all, he says, in my craft or sullen art. I love the word sullen. I always remember the word sullen from The Doors movie. You guys remember the Doors? They're backstage at the Ed Sullivan concert, and he says, "Why don't you put a smile on your face, boys? Don't go out there looking sullen." And Jim says, "Well, we're kind of a sullen group, Ed." So that's how I learned the word sullen. So he says, "In my craft or sullen art, he's brooding, he's by himself, exercised in the still night, when only the moon rages and the lovers lie abed." So he writes when many artists and writers will create at night. You probably remember studying at night, because you get the stillness of the night. But the moon, he says, is raging. That's interesting that only the moon rages. The lovers lie abed with all their griefs in their arms. Now that's poignant, isn't it? If you're in a relationship, or you've been in a relationship, or you can imagine a relationship, right, where we have the griefs, the couple who are holding each other in bed at night, sleeping, but their griefs are in their arms. And I imagine that is like their griefs are in their arms, like both their own heart and their loved ones. And I think that that's an interesting image, right? I labor by singing light. The singing light is obviously the light of the candle, and it's so quiet and still that he can hear the sound, the slight sound of the candle, and it's almost singing to him in the wind, right? He says, not for ambition or bread, or the strut and trade of charms on the ivory stages. So he's not writing to be a great poet. He's not writing for money, for wealth. He's not writing for he's not a Shakespeare. He doesn't intend to dramatize his work on the ivory stages. He says, but for the common wages, the common man, it's very Welsh, isn't it? The common wages of their most secret heart. And again, we get this image of the heart, right? The people lying in bed with their griefs in their arms. And I think that what he's saying here is powerful, because it usually would not work for the speaker in a poem to tell us what they're doing. But in this instance, he's showing us through telling us. I'm not sure how to explain this, but by telling us what he's doing, we are able to visualize this scene. I visualize, maybe it's because I've read Under Milk Wood so many times, I visualize the working class seaside town. Visualize your own town. If you guys, we all live in, various places, but think of the state of the world now, right? Where, I certainly am aware of the working class plight, because, I don't want to say I live it, I'm working class, but, I think all of us probably are barely working for our bread nowadays, right? And he's saying that he's doing this, he's writing just for them. They may never see it, but he's simply writing to express the griefs of their most secret heart. He says, not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write. Okay, not for the sort of Byronic hero, right, or the war hero of these spindrift pages. I put that in the channel description. The spindrift pages. Spindrift is a great word that it's almost an archaic word that sort of, I picture, bits of like wood, right, and sort of refuse washing up on the shores of this village, and he's sort of writing with whatever he can in this sort of almost like druidical setting. Not for the towering dead. It's interesting he mentions right there the tower, right, the towering dead. They're towering dead because they are the dead piled one on top of the other, especially in the context of the wartime setting, right? They're towering because they loom over the living population. They're towering because they represent something hidden. They've crossed over into the undiscovered country. But he says, for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages. Okay, so now their arms are not just around each other, but they're around the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art. No one will listen. Maybe nobody will ever see this poem. but he's still writing it because he's called to do such. I love that poem. Why don't we read? I'll save "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night" for the one after this. I think I'll read something you may never have heard before. I could read Fern Hill, but I think I'll read. Let's see. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower. Where's that? Yes, okay, let's read that one. That's one of my favorites and is not often read. Okay, excuse me. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower is what this is called. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams turns mine to wax. And I am dumb to mouth unto my veins how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind hauls my shroud sail. And I'm dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I'm dumb to tell a weather's wind how time is ticked to heaven round the stars. And I'm dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm. Okay, that's a great poem. That's a lot to take in on just an initial reading. So let's just go through the poem real quickly. I'm not going to do too much of a deep dive with this poem, but it's a great poem because it's about the metaphysical, invisible force that drives life, right? And what he's saying here is first of all, the force that through the green fuse is the flower stem, right? Now imagine what he's saying here. He's saying, just stepping back and imagining without putting anything into it, just imagine that every year you have these things that are buried in the ground, and every year around the same time they pop up and they reach for the sun and they grow this green stem, and then life pushes through them, a life force pushes through them, and then at the end they reach out and there's a flower, there's a blossom, a bloom, right? Where they show their face to the sun. Now imagine that it's one of the miracles of life, right? It's one of the crazy things that every year this works like clockwork, that God creates this world where every year this happens, right? Where his life force pushes through the dirt, and every year we have death to life, death to life, death to life, right? He says it drives his green age. He's young and youthful. That blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. That's interesting. Blasting the root of trees. I guess the root of the trees, the earth, is also where one would be buried, right? So you think of him, if he's thinking of himself like as the flower, right? He lives and dies, and he's comparing himself in the cycle of life to this flower. He says the force that drives the water through the rocks. That reminds me of T.S. Eliot. There's a verse in The Wasteland where he says, what does he say? Where is the water under these rocks? I cannot find the water under these rocks. That's biblical also. If somebody knows the allusion to that. What's the water under the rocks? Is it from Ecclesiastes? He says, drives my red blood, right? Your blood, think of that. Your blood driving through your veins with this like invisible chemistry, this invisible like engine. And it's always the same. It's for everyone. That dries the mouthing streams turns mine to wax. I love his repetition of, and how I am dumb to mouth, right? How I am dumb. He's dumb because he cannot, it's sort of ironic, right? He cannot speak. He can't put into words the wonder, the like invisible beauty of what he witnesses in his youth, of the like clockwork of nature, and yet he's putting it into words right here in the poem. Yes, he says, "The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail." His shroud sail, right, is the, we, of course, he's Welsh, and this could stand for anybody. It doesn't have to just be, a Welshman, but seeing the ships go by, right, right outside the port, right outside of Larne, where he lived, and or later, Swansea. But the shroud is the death shroud, right? So he's simultaneously sort of appreciating his youth, but also seeing his eventual death. He says, "And I'm dumb to tell the hanging man." Now, the hanging man, is this a reference to, obviously, you want to think of the hangman, right, in the tarot. But also, is this a literal hanging man? Is this an execution? The hanging man, how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. Well, that's true, right? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Yes, we're created from clay. That even the hangman's lime is made of the same clay of which his body is made, right? The lips of time, I like that rhyme there. It's an internal rhyme. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked to heaven round the stars. I love that verse. How time has ticked to heaven round the stars. Now, it's beautiful, but I don't think it's true. I don't want to read into it what I am reading into it. When he says time is ticked to heaven round the stars, well, heaven was there, right? Time and people did not create the heaven around the stars. The stars are created around the heaven, right? So I'm not sure of what he's trying to say there. It almost seems like it's evolutionary, and like this is veering into like almost a like Celtic naturalistic, like, nature worship poem. It's not that, but the line is so beautiful, but it belies something I don't agree with, right? How time has ticked to heaven round the stars. Now we can tell time we can see direction and time according to the stars. However, I'm not sure of what to read into that metaphysically, right? And I'm dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm. Well, that's obviously a foreshadowing of his death, right? He sees his death. He sees the worm, the crooked worm. What does Shakespeare say about the crooked worm? It's in one of the sonnets. And the lover's tomb, dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm. That's interesting. A lot of criticism that people have of Dylan Thomas is that his poems can veer into surrealism and nonsense, into nonsensical poems, sort of dream language. And I would probably agree with that criticism for the most part. Dylan Thomas can appeal especially to younger people because the lyricism and the words can overpower the sense of meaning. In other words, we get brilliant language, but what does it mean? And so we have to look at the construction of the poems. It has to fit into the framework. And that's not to say that some poems that are surrealist in nature don't show their meaning through a lack of content, right? For instance, you get Tristan Tzara and Dadaist poetry, and Andre Breton and Apollinaire and some of the French surrealists. But their poems only work so much. You can only read one or two poems before you start to think, okay, this is too much. I get it. I get surrealism. Now let's move on. Because obviously what they're saying is, especially with like Dadaism, right, is meaninglessness, chaos in the world. Nothing has meaning. So their poems become nonsense poems, right? Yes, Nico says twilight language. That's a good point. Yeah. I would say that that makes me think of that. Dylan Thomas, not from, I haven't read anything that would say specifically that he was into the occult. Um, I'll have to go back and look, but I'm not sure. I don't remember or recall anything saying that he was like specifically interested in the occult. He did obviously have a wide range of interests, and he wrote about a wide range of things. But you know, I was reading. I said this on the stream earlier with ADH. Shout out to A Devotional Heart. Go back and you guys watch that stream if you haven't seen it, on the Devotional Hearts channel. But I mentioned at the end of the stream that uh, I was talking about this guy Victor Neuberg in the stream with Andrew and Jerry the other night on the Crucible channel. And it's strange because I never like I haven't thought of that dude's name in like, I don't know, 20 years. But all of a sudden I guess his name just occurred to me. And who Victor Neuberg was I think he was born in 1880, and he was a poet. He was into the occult and sort of esoteric stuff, secret societies, and he was co-opted by Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley sort of took him as a disciple. He was because he was malleable. He was kind of weak-minded, subject to hypnosis, and he plied him with various drugs, and took him out to do rituals in the Algerian desert. This is when Crowley was doing his John Dee Enochian magic rituals. And he put him in a magic circle. And he thought of Neuberg as kind of his, I guess, sort of the Edward Kelly to his John Dee, even though Crowley himself thought he was the reincarnation of Edward Kelly. But long story short, I'll try to make it short. Victor Neuberg was driven insane by Crowley's antics. They were, he used him sexually and in all sorts of depraved manners. And Neuberg, who was a poet and publisher, went insane. Well, I was talking about that on the Crucible channel, and then all of a sudden, yesterday, I just started glancing at some old Dylan Thomas biographical stuff, and the first page I opened to was Dylan Thomas's 18 poems, his book 18 Poems, his first published book, and there's I can't remember if it's a dedication, but there's a page with Victor Neuberg's name on it, because Victor Neuberg is the guy who discovered Dylan Thomas and first published him. Now that is weird. That's like not a connection that I remember ever making before. And I'm just talking about this in relation to sort of Dylan Thomas's interest in the occult. I think that one obvious reference to make would be, yes, Crowley's house on Loch Ness was owned by Jimmy Page. Yes, Boleskine House. It's not there anymore. It burned down a few years ago. Some say that Crowley is the one who conjured the Loch Ness monster. I don't know. Anyway, and Page actually owned a number of Crowley houses. He owned one on the Thames. He owned the Equinox bookstore and a number of his a huge collection of his original manuscripts. But anyway, back to Dylan Thomas. I think if we're going to talk the occult with Dylan Thomas, one connection that could be made would be through his wife, Caitlin, who was a crazy character. Actually, I said this in another stream. I had a professor in Belfast named Edna Longley, who, when she was a young lady studying in Belfast, she was alive when Dylan Thomas was alive, and he came to the city to do a reading, and she went outside and witnessed one day the two of them coming out of a pub, drop dead drunk, and she was beating on him, like physically beating him up, and this was sort of part of their tempestuous relationship. She was a real battle axe, as Norm Macdonald would say. But I think she did have some occult connections. She was certainly a feminist. She was a dancer, and she may have been involved in some strange activities. She was the kind of, in a weird way, kind of the Yoko to his John Lennon, even though I wouldn't compare them otherwise. That's sort of an unfair comparison to make. But yeah, a really weird relationship. She was like the alpha in their relationship. He was kind of a small guy, kind of pudgy, and obviously very sensitive, and he had a lot of health problems. Maybe it would be more apt to describe them in, remember in Tombstone? You guys seen the movie Tombstone? Remember when Doc, Val Kilmer, is lying in bed and the doctor comes to see him and says, "No more cards, no more gambling." And he lights up a cigarette or whatever. And his Hungarian girlfriend says, "Doc can go all night and all day and then some." And he says, "My sweet, soft Hungarian devil." I think that may be more of a way to describe them, that they were sort of partners in their pub crawling and drinking. And so I'll just finish up here by saying I'll just say some ending biographical information about Dylan Thomas, and then I'll read his "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," which is the cover picture for this because it's from remember they read it in Interstellar. Michael Caine reads it. "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of Master Wayne. Master Wayne, when I was in Burma, we found rubies the size of grapefruits, Master Wayne." So anyway, Dylan Thomas, when he went to New York to do a final tour, and I mean, he was a real character. He would have a start time. Let's say the reading started at 8 p.m. and he would hit every pub on the way to the reading. Get there like an hour and a half late, by which time the people were angry. They were waiting with bated breath. But it was a packed hall. And one particular instance that's pretty infamous. He showed up. He walked up to the podium. He inhaled like he was about to speak, and then he threw up over the audience. And that sort of sealed his notoriety, especially with the critics. I'm sure they didn't like it if they were there, but the critics reading about it loved him, and it gained him a huge audience. Anyway, he was sick, and they sort of made him continue to tour. He went to New York. He was staying at the Chelsea Hotel, famous Chelsea Hotel, right, where Sid Vicious killed Nancy Spungen, where Patti Smith and all these bohemians later lived. But he went to the pub, and his last words were something like, "I've just had 17 straight whiskeys. I think that's the record." Then he went unconscious. Later, I found out that what actually happened was when he was unconscious, the doctor gave him a fatal morphine overdose. So they overdosed him, and he died. He died at the age of 39, and is sort of sealed in the history of literature as one of these bright burning flames, right? So you can still visit his boathouse at Larne where he lived. It's a true like writer's shack with pictures of like W.H. Auden and various people on the walls. So let's read this last poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." It's a very famous poem, and this poem it's 19 lines. It actually takes the form of something called a villanelle. A villanelle is a ancient French, like probably 12th century French troubadour form, where you have stanzas. You have 3-line stanzas, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 5 3-line stanzas, and a final 4-line stanza. And the rhyme scheme goes A, B, A, B, C, B, C, D, C, etc. And that sort of gives us the impression of like going forward, stepping back, going forward, stepping back, a little bit at a time. And we'll see that form really fits the content of this poem. This is probably the most famous villanelle. So here we go. "Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late, they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. So, yes, everybody probably remembers this poem. You've heard it certainly in the film Interstellar. And they sort of, it's kind of malleable because they sort of make it into their own theme with that film, right? You've got the bubble and the black hole and the tesseract and, the event horizon of the film. But let's see what it means in the lines of the poem, because I read this poem like a number of different ways that sort of contradict each other. Do not go gentle into that good night. So we assume he's talking about the good night is the good night of death, right? Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Okay, so the close of day is the literal old age. We have, like, think of someone with dementia, right? Raving and burning at the close of day. It gets worse at nighttime. However, this is like they should fight at the end of the day of the light of day of life, right? And they should rage against the dying of the light. Don't die, in other words. The wise men at their end know dark is right. In other words, they know that they will go into the darkness of death. They will end their daylight life, right? Because their words had forked no lightning. In other words, I think what he's saying here is because wise men know or think that they have not done enough in life, right? They will fight at the last minute for life. They will fight at the end to stay alive. But forked is interesting, right? Because forked, no lightning. Obviously, the lightning itself is forked. The image of the lightning is forked. We get lightning like the lightning strike. You imagine like the lightning strike of Zeus, right? Ride the lightning, right? But forked, a forked tongue is like a double speak, right? That almost sounds like lies. Good. So now he contrasts it with good men, the last wave by. Imagine that's almost like a pure warlike image, right? The last wave onto the beach. Or like the last wave of, the people departing on the ship. That makes me think of Crossing the Bar by Alfred Lord Tennyson, a great poem that's often read at funerals, Crossing the Bar. Crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. They could have done things. They could have lived. They could have lived a better life. So they rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. They learned too late that their deeds belie any goodness they could have done. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight. Right? Seeking the sun, I suppose. What's that mean, you guys? Seeking the sun of fame, seeking the sun of illuminate, confirm. Learn too late, they grieved it on its way, because on its way is like that. Again, that's almost like an Apollonian image, right? You get Apollo on his chariot, with Aurora crossing the sky, going down into darkness. Grave men is obviously that is a pure Shakespearean pun right there. Ask for me tomorrow and you shall find me a grave man, is what Mercutio says. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Okay, that's a reference. That's almost a Sophoclean reference, or like in T.S. Eliot's In the Wasteland, Tiresias, right? That's the blind seer, the person who cannot literally see, but they can metaphysically see the truth or the future or fortune, right? Who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors. They're seeing their future because they're dying, right? It's unfortunate. He says, and be gay here. Here's you know, we can't help but notice the connotation of the word now. And it's, you know, it's weird how language and its denotation and connotation changes, because you can have any word now, and then what will it be in the future that sort of denigrates the line, right? But then the last stanza, he has this, what you call a volta, in verse, which is like a change, a shift. It's a total shift in tone, because he's speaking now directly to, and you, my father, there on the sad height. The sad height because he's above him. He's on a bed. He's put his father on a pedestal. The sad height, maybe he's looking at the gravestone, right? There on the sad height. Curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. So he's praying, but he's praying that his father will do anything, will curse or bless him, just show some signs of life, which is interesting, right? He just wants some vitality from his father. And then finally we end with the direction: don't go gentle into that good night, rage against the dying of the light. So that's it. That's Dylan Thomas for you guys. And yeah, we've only done 3 poems. We've only done three of his poems. We could keep going. We could do a lot of his other work. We could read Under Milk Wood and look at some of his lesser known poems. But we could look at Fern Hill, which is probably my favorite of his poems. Yes, Jeff, exactly. That's a good, yeah. Tom Coombe, Magnolia vibes with, who was his dad in that movie? Jason Robards, which is actually pretty apt to this. I think Jason Robards was an explicit fan of Dylan Thomas. Yeah, see if I think it's Jason Robards. Is it Robert Duvall? I think Jason Robards is in Magnolia, but maybe he's another character. I don't think it's Duvall. Duvall is in Days of Thunder, right? You got to go around the track slow. You can't be this rock and roller going too fast around the track. You got to go around the track slow. Like you got to untie your shoelaces slow, one at a time when you're driving on my track. Remember that Velcro they put on the shoes? You got to undo the Velcro one thing at a time. You can't be some rock and roll out there, Tom Coombe. You got to learn how to go around. Are you eating ice cream over there? That's right. I'm eating ice cream. I'm eating this ice cream real slow. Robert Duvall's in like a lot of like car movies too, right? He's in, remember he's in Gone in 60 Seconds, right? And Nick Cage is, I'm not going to do a Nick Cage impression. You got to see JD for the Nick Cage impressions. But he's like, I want to steal this car, right? And he's like, listen, you're going to steal the car. You got to steal the car slow. You got to steal it. Come on back here. We're going to have everything on this board written in black light. Cops ain't ever going to find it, but you got to bring the car back slow with Angelina Jolie, right? All right, you guys. I love Robert Duvall. Robert Duvall's awesome. I don't want to say he's underrated because he's highly rated, and now I guess he's totally retired. He is still alive, isn't he? I think he lives in Virginia. He lives in Northern Virginia on a horse farm. But I like that. You remember that movie, The Apostle, where he plays, he plays a kind of a Randy Balls character in that movie. But I like that movie though. He's got those cool shades on. He's obviously great in the Godfather movies. He's sort of an underrated character in that, right? I always thought it was weird how he was in those movies. And then, of course, he's, you want to wait around here for 6 hours? Any man that can hold his guts in, drink from my canteen any day. What you mean, Harry? It's Charlie's point. It's a little hairy. I don't want to say my favorite quote because it's RAYCISS and I can't say it, but you remember that part? Long Dong Wop. Remember that? The name of the village. We'll pick it up and drop it anywhere you want, young captain. He's so awesome in that movie, you guys. If you're watching this and you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, go watch Apocalypse Now. Cut out 3 hours of your life and just sit down. Don't look at the phone. Don't be bothered with anything else and just watch the movie. That line in the movie where they say he knew he wasn't going to get so much as a scratch. Like, it's so true. You could see Kilgore as this guy who's like, His dad was in WW2. His granddad was in World War One. His great granddad was like in the Spanish American. It goes all the way back, and he's just the latest iteration. And he knows he's not going to get so much as a scratch, right? He wears the old cavalry hat, and he's got the yellow scarf, right? Death from above. Charlie, don't surf. Awesome. That's Charlie's point. Who else? What else was Robert Duvall great in? He was great in. There's a great movie. It's called like something Tango. And he plays like an old sort of retired hitman, and he goes down. He gets a job in like Argentina, and he goes down there and he like falls in love, and he like learns how to tango. But he's still a hitman. It's pretty good actually. It's not bad. What else was he in? Mustard Gashes. Yeah, that Henry Lee Lucas, he was a good boy. He was a nice boy down there in the Everglades. Mustard Gashes. Who else can we talk about before we get off here? There is a movie about Dylan Thomas. There's it's called The Edge of Love. It's okay. It's got this English actor that I am not really a fan of. He's in a bunch. You'll recognize him when you see him. He got a 9 head, not a 4 head. But it doesn't really get there. You can't really get Dylan Thomas like in a film. He's like, he doesn't really translate into movies well enough. Same with guys like, Mark Twain. He doesn't really translate into film. Oh, speaking of Val Kilmer, did you guys ever see any of Val Kilmer's Mark Twain one-man play? It's awesome. It's really like the peak of his career, I think. Remember Val Kilmer is he trained as a theater actor. He did the voice of Moses in is it Prince of Egypt? Which was a hugely popular stage play in LA before they made the film. And of course he trained it. Val Kilmer was the youngest guy ever accepted to Juilliard. He's in Sling Blade, French fried potatoes. Billy Bob Thornton. My favorite Billy Bob Thornton role is obviously Tombstone. Is that a fact? Right? Because he doesn't even, it's like early Billy Bob Thornton, and he's like pudgy, and he like doesn't really look like Billy Bob Thornton, and he plays like a really good bully who then, the tables are turned on him, right? Smoke it, skin that smoke wagon and see what happens to you. You gonna stand there and bleed, boy, right? Oh, why, Johnny Tyler? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you were there. You may go now, right? Texas Creek Jack Johnson and Texas Jack Vermillion. We ought to do a Tombstone analysis, just a pure Tombstone analysis for no reason other than just doing Tombstone, right? Everybody quotes I'm your Huckleberry, but play for blood, remember? Well, that's just my game. White, I stand corrected. You're an oak. Yeah, that's a great film. I like when Charlton Heston shows up in his cameo, like sort of late in the film. What does he say? They're at somebody's ranch, like Dylan's ranch. He's like, I'm Dylan, and this is my ranch. And that's it. That's his only line. Have you guys ever seen Charlton Heston's IMAX movie, Alaska? It's hilarious. It's really funny. Because the voiceover is like all the lines are like it begins with it's like cold, barren, Alaska. I'm Charlton Heston, Alaska. The whole thing is like that. I'm not really doing it justice, but it's really funny. Okay, guys, that's about all I got. I'm just babbling on now. Thank you for being here with me. I appreciate it. If you're watching this later, please hit the like button. Just give me a like. Maybe share it on social media. Make sure you click the bell and that you sub. We're going to be doing these a lot. Probably be doing one a day this week on various authors and various writers. And, we'll have some fun and we'll riff at the end there. If you see the links that my homeboys have been dropping in the chat or in the description, please consider supporting me and supporting the channel. I'd really appreciate it. so we can keep on moving onward and upward. So I really, really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for being here. I hope everybody has a great Saturday night and a great Sunday. And that's all I got. Peace, y'all. Thanks for chilling with me. Peace.